Welcome, everyone. You're listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lorilee Binstock, host of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. Today's guest is Lainie Sevante Wulkan, the founder of the Center for Intuitive Food Therapy and best-selling author of the Food Healing Oracle Decks, Smoothies. That's what it includes, Smoothies, a 38 recipe guide to using intentional ingredients for specific vibrational outcomes and top exotic foods for natural healing. She has just launched her latest and #1 international best-selling book, High Vibrational Wellness: Intuitive Healing Therapies to Nourish Your Body Temple. Lainie, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
This is all
It's
so
so,
interesting.
no, I'm just thinking, I'm reveling in just the title and the platform of your show, being that I just went through two hurricanes and like
Oh, you're in Florida?
yeah, just
Oh, no.
decompressing. It's like, wow, it's so present, the traumas people go through, especially when you live in rural areas like ours. It's just really like very present when you think about trauma. But
How were
anyway,
you guys
to get to
afterward?
that. What's that?
Well, how were you guys afterwards? Are you at least where you are?
Yeah, I live on a really beautiful small island off the Gulf Coast, and we
Mm.
flooded, got a little bit of water. But if that's the worst of it, we can rebuild and we're all safe and everything's fine. I think what happens when you're around impending natural disasters, such as a hurricane, you have all the psychological stuff that happens before. It's the buildup. It's coming. It's like this big monster coming. But then you get through it, and then you walk, and then the next day the birds are chirping, the sun is shining, and you realize how much you love Florida, and you're like, oh my goodness. And you kind of have to walk through all the steps again of just kind of rebuilding the energetic frame of balance in the body.
Oh,
But I
wow.
pay for that. That's what I do. So luckily
Oh,
I'm equipped.
well,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're safe and you're able to join us. That is a lot to deal with. That was just last week. So, wow.
Yeah, a couple of days ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from Florida. I'm actually from Jacksonville, Florida. So, um we never really got a ton of hurricanes growing up. Like there was always I feel like we're just like nestled right there, and we're also on the East Coast. The Gulf has
Uh-huh.
warmer water, so it's interesting, but I have family in Miami who went through Hurricane Andrew, so
Oh yeah.
that is very traumatic. It's very traumatic.
Where I
So,
am right now, Miami, getting ready to go on a trip to Nepal, and I'll be leaving in just a couple hours.
oh wow, well, you got a lot of stuff going on. So much stuff going on. So we'll go with the interview, and maybe we touch on what you're doing in Nepal, because I know you do a lot of work there.
I do. Part of
Awesome.
my teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm of the understanding that, what you put into your body can result in the outcome of not just your physical health, but your mental health, and um, you know, then your mental health really affects your physical health. At least that's what in my belief, that's how I feel. But you take it a step further. Um and explore the energy, frequency, and vibration of food, and connect, deep layers to what we eat and why. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to talk about that, but I also want to know your story and how you got into this work.
Yes, thank you. So, the first part of that question is yes, there's a lot more to how we are feeding this temple. We do put the food in our body, we do physically nourish ourselves, and sometimes we don't nourish ourselves. And that is hopefully where I'm helping to change that. But it's also about the food we put into our thoughts, what we're feeding our thoughts and our mindset, and how we feed our soul. And so that is where the sort of mind body spirit connection comes in. And whether you're walking a very spiritual path or not, there's a consciousness around understanding more about the whys and the whats we're putting in our bodies, in our minds, and our thoughts. And so I came from a very intuitive family. I'm a fourth generation intuitive. I've always been someone who always had an ability to be able to read people, be very intuitive, be psychic. It's just part of who I've always been. I've always had an oracle card or a tarot card in my hand. When everybody else was playing Go Fish as a kid or Crazy Eights, I was playing with oracle cards. And it wasn't until a little bit later on that my esoteric family had was my mother was getting a reading, and the reader at that time, I think I was in my, around 8 years old, said that I looks like I might have died in a past life of food poisoning. And wouldn't
Oh,
it be interesting that in this lifetime that I ended up getting a career in food? Well, it was interesting for me because as time went on, I was always very hypersensitive around food. In terms of being a little bit of a hypochondriac, I was always mindful of, does it have mold? What is the expiration date? Is it ready? Is it at the right temperature? Is it spoiled? And anyways, that led me to going to school for a career in food science and dietetics and nutrition. So I kind of brought in that science side of understanding food and how it works in the body and how it heals. And then I was very blessed to work for a spiritual family who were very famous. They were famous chefs to the celebrities of Hollywood, the best, the highest, the A-list stars. Many years ago, this was decades ago, and I started to see that food has an energy and a frequency and vibration, as you mentioned, and how we think around food. We are actually putting that wonderful energy into when we're preparing something with love and joy.
mm,
However, if we're angry and we're yelling with our spouse, we're putting that negative energy, and you could feel it in the food. And sometimes you could just know the same meal tastes differently and you don't know why. And I believe it's in energetics. So in my studies throughout the last several decades, I started to marry sort of the spiritual and consciousness around how we're feeding our soul on all the levels, and then how we're actually taking that scientifically and kind of moving it all together. And that's what happened about 5 years ago. I created something called the Food Healing Oracle Deck. My passion for oracle cards, my knowledge of food science, and kind of like this sandwiched into this wonderful guide for people to understand when they're in a bad mood, why are they craving that food? Or when they go to
mm.
the grocery store, why do they have to have, butternut squash that day? Or why are they craving artichokes? And so I started to kind of take all the different pieces to my world of knowledge and put it together into a teaching tool that people can use as a guide to, like, why am I wanting blueberries? I can't, that's all I want. And so I started to put words to foods and started to listen to my inner guidance, which I've been a channel for most of my life. That's
Wow.
a smaller version of how it all works. But then, yeah, you start to look at how you eat and how that affects your chakra system, or you're hyper type A and you have lots of anger management issues and you're very fiery, and you start looking at that fire element, if you're looking at the nature's five elements and how to cool that down. So I started preparing wisdom for that and guidance to allow people to deal with grief, to deal with stress, to deal with traumas, to deal with anger, to deal with joy, and how you can do that by telling your body, this is the frequency of love, this is the frequency of peace and calm, and how we can release things from the body as well.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I have so many questions just from like I'm like trying where do I organize my thoughts? I have to say it did remind me of there was a movie like probably 20 years ago. Um, it was it was a lesbian couple, and I remember they were sitting in the movie. I think, oh gosh, I want to say it was not. It was Diane Keaton maybe. I don't know, but there was the daughter was sitting at the table, and she refused to eat the meat that was in front of her, and she was talking about the anxiety that the cow had because before it was murdered to become
Yeah,
food.
slaughtered, right.
And I don't know if you remember if you know that movie. You probably do if I gave you way more, detail, but I just
I don't
remember.
know the movie, but I do know the scenario many times over. Because I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot, and the food healing oracle deck is vegan, and
Mhm.
but I don't sit and advocate one way or the other. In my new book, my new collaborative, High Vibrational Wellness, one of the chapters from Angela Roray Smith actually talks about that whole experience because the book is 25 stories of different people giving their own experience and then how they moved out to the other side with a healing tool. And hers was specifically about how she couldn't eat the animals and the meat. And then as time went on, she got the guidance on how to pray over the food and how to raise its vibration and bring kindness and gratitude to the animal who gave up its life. And so she was then able to start eating meat and hadn't eaten meat for years. So she tells her whole story in great detail. But
Wow.
that is a very common situation. And probably for a lot of vegans, that's one of the reasons why that they don't want to eat animals for that.
Wow.
For that. They don't want to bring on the consciousness of the dead energy, is what they'll say.
Wow. You talked about cravings. Why do we crave certain things? Around my cycle, right before,
Mhm.
I am ravenous and I'm like, I know this isn't good for my body right now. Like,
Yeah.
what is that saying? What is that telling me? Am I listening to my body or that was just really interesting that you brought that up, the cravings. What is that all about?
Well, it's several abouts. I mean, there's several ways to look at it because you can look at it from an emotional point of view, a mental, a physical, and a spiritual. And there could be some biochemistry in there that you are craving certain foods like carbs or sugars. And
Mm.
there are other times that when we have PMS, we're more irritable and we're more just wanting to, tear something or someone apart. And so, and I look at it in terms of energy. So I look at it in terms of the five elements. So I provide ways that show you what foods relate to those elements. So around the cycle, a lot of people, if they're having PMS symptoms, they are kind of on high fire energy. And what would cool that down is like if I'm really feeling like things are up for me, I'd be cooling things down with watery foods, things that kind of
Mm.
bring the energy back down and creating that balance. Actually, the balance card, if you're familiar with oracle cards, there's a word that's assigned to, in my deck, it's food. In others, it could be a spirit animal, it could be a mermaid or a dolphin, but food takes on that character. But it also is absolutely scientifically showing like cucumbers is our balance card, which is a balanced pH, which brings things down. And so it is great to actually see what you're craving. And a lot of times we do that self sabotage and we start craving that inner aisle stuff. We start craving the things that we can't pronounce with the 10 ingredients that you don't even
All
know
the
what it
processed
is,
stuff.
all the process stuff. And so it's a real retraining to go into your intuition and say, I'm really feeling off right now. And what would be in my highest good? And you can actually pull a card, you can just tune in. I have a whole set of different ways you can say, what is in my highest good to bring me back, get me through these next few days until things kind of,
Mm.
release. And hopefully that stuff from the outer aisles, the foods that are most bioavailable, the foods that are easy, that your soul's saying, yes, I want that. I want to eat that. I want to make myself feel a lot better by doing that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know cravings, that's one of the topics. Somebody, Linda McBee, she wrote a chapter on cravings. She wrote cravings, what they are and what you can do about it, because she speaks to it. She's actually an certified intuitive food therapist, but she talks a lot about cravings. And sometimes, if you really want to take on sort of that esoteric understanding, that sometimes we crave stuff and it's not even ours. It's something that kind of came in, like it came in through generational. And you can actually
Mm.
those cycles too. So in the new book, High Vibrational Wellness, we talk about breaking generational cycles. because
Wow.
food sometimes have a history, and it could be not even ours that we're taking on as part of our lineage.
Wow. Yeah, I was speaking to somebody who's dealing with an eating disorder. I went into treatment with her. I didn't have an eating disorder, obviously. I dealt with trauma, childhood sexual abuse trauma, and she was in there for an eating disorder. And, she was also adopted from, a third world country. And she was like, I don't know if it's because, I food was scarce to me, and I felt this need that and my family felt this need, like, to, like, overeat, and then we would feel the shame, and then, as a
Yeah.
child, feel the shame, and then obviously it, like, cycled into this thing, and I was like, "That is a very interesting, perspective," and I felt like it did need to be honored.
It's absolutely. I remember somebody telling me once, because my background is my great grandmother actually was the town psychic in Russia. And,
Mm,
they probably held on to foods because, like you say, scarcity. And so you think about foods that would ground, and you start looking at earth foods, things that are rooted like potatoes, sweet potatoes. And those tend to be the things that I crave, things that are from the ground, which is
mhm,
an earth element too, is to ground that energy. So it's interesting when you kind of go down this little enlightened rabbit hole, how many things you start to realize make sense. And then if you go over to sort of like, the energetic system of the body, it's really amazing how you start to kind of like take off the blinders and realize there's a whole messaging going on your dinner plate. And I've seen it so many times where people say, "What should I have for dinner tonight?" And they pull cards, like, say, for the family, and it's all something they've been going through. It's just
mm,
amazing. I did an event once, and there was a group of 4 to 6 people. And what I noticed, and we didn't know at the time, but it turned out within 2 months, everyone who had come to this group had all lost a pet, and that they
wow,
were all grieving. So I said, you know what? Let's make a meal. Let's pull some cards and see what would allow some healing, some, support from the grief that everyone, including myself, had felt. We pulled 4 to 6 cards. I don't remember exactly, but we pulled rosemary for remembrance, remembering our loved one. We pulled feelings, ginger. We pulled support, butternut squash, comfort, sweet potato. And it was literally everything that we were feeling and wanting to kind of have that, healing experience. And so we decided to make a soup from it, because soup is always such a comfort food. So it's
mhm.
amazing that the universe speaks to you. And so I'm helping to provide that guideline on how it all works.
I feel like people can be intuitive, but there are times where there's trauma and past trauma that kind of cloud that knowing, that understanding, and do you believe that that could be a hindrance to, being able to read what our body needs for food?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, I think about, I went through a trauma 10 years ago. I lost my past partner to suicide. And I
Mm,
remember the time I was so unconscious, so shattered, completely broken, and I didn't eat. I just went on becoming a breatharian. I just didn't want to. When you go through trauma, everyone processes differently. Some people overeat, some people don't eat.
right.
Years later, I've learned that, gosh, if I had put together all my tools back then, what I know now, this 5 years ago, I created the deck. I would have been listening to my body saying, I'm really feeling that right now I cannot even think about food, but what is my body wanting from me? Because so often we are doing stuff to our body, but if we take a moment to just listen, it's just been so there to support us. If we could just say, what do you need from me right now? You're always sustaining me, body. You're always helping me. You're always helping me get over a sickness. You're helping me move through a trauma. How can I support you? And if you just have this kind of inner relationship, this inner dialogue with your body, this is your temple, you would see that it would tell you exactly what you need to help move the energy along better, further, faster through those
Wow.
times where things are just all out. You're so clouded naturally, of course, emotionally and mentally, but those are the times that you need to have the physical sustaining you better to keeping you afloat when all the other systems are kind of shut down.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for that. You do talk about cleansing of food toxins, and we often hear about food like high in antioxidants. Um, is that what you talk about when discussing cleansing of food toxins and pollutants? And if so, what are your top foods that have kind of fall in line? So I
Uh,
got to go grocery shopping after this.
Well, it's so interesting. I was working with a client last night doing a reading, and when you do a session with me, lots of things come up. It's not just about food, but in any case, she was going through clearing some trauma. And it's so interesting when I walk through the process at the end of the session, I said, let's pull a card to kind of see where we're at now that we've done what we've done. And so I pull the card and she gets purification, which is the basil card. And so
Oh,
I thought, well, I think it's time to wake up and smell and eat some basil because any basil is quite good. Cilantro is quite good. Not everybody likes cilantro. Rosemary's good. A lot of the really green terpene, the flavorful herbs are so good. And then in our deck, the actual detoxification card is limes. Very, very
mm,
good for the body to kind of cleanse. And you see cucumbers. That's a lot of times when we are out of balance, and I mentioned that earlier, and you see that at spas, like, would you like some
mm.
cucumber water? That actually brings your pH back to balance. Because a lot of times when we're detoxifying, we are finding our bodies more at an acidic state. Where even with anything that's fiery, anger, depression, anything that becomes caustic, acidic, that's the lower pH. And we want to move our bodies back up into an alkaline. That's why people want to be have alkaline water. They want to have
Mhm.
our bodies more in a healthy state. So if you can move your body back into that. And interestingly, I'll bring up one of the foods is artichoke. Artichoke,
Oh,
which happens to be our forgiveness card. And interestingly, when you think about an artichoke, picture an artichoke. Everyone who's watching and listening, an artichoke looks like a flower, and it's protecting the heart. So when we're going
no.
through times of trauma, think about the artichoke. It's got all those leaves with the spiny thorns, and it's protecting the heart. And so if we can actually almost take the artichoke and peel back each layer as a ceremony, you can actually like think about the things that you've been holding on to for forgiveness. Like talk about detoxification, like removing the layers so the heart can shine again. And
Mm.
the artichoke happens to be the highest in pH, 13.99. So it's at the absolute high end of the alkalinity scale. So that's to me like, wow, that's everything. It actually looks like the crown chakra too, if you want to go there. But that shows you sort of like, wow, I'll never look at an artichoke again. But even when I'm going through things, I think about, I really need to forgive myself for holding on to something, for judging myself, or you need to forgive the other person. Let's just say such a situation came up with the trauma. I have always found artichokes to be very healing for all the reasons. That's emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual right there.
Wow. That's so interesting. So then what if you're like, I love artichokes, and so now I'm gonna make artichokes every single day. Can you
Well,
really go overboard and not be balanced?
I think moderation is the key to everything because eventually
Yeah.
your body will tell you like, okay, I think we've forgiven, we're good, but I find it with natural foods, fruits, vegetables, herbs, nuts, and spices, it's very hard to completely overdo it. Except in this, situations where there's too much. Like I'm thinking about pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds have omegas 3, 6, and 9s, but you don't want too many sixes. So sometimes foods are good as a little tonic, like a little bite, and other times have at it. But I'd say enjoy those artichokes the best you can. They're so good for you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I saw language that you use culinary therapy. Is this
Hmm.
what culinary therapy is?
Yeah, well, yes. And so there's actually a chapter in Chef Joy Davis. She's actually a social worker. She wrote that a chapter about culinary therapy in the new book. I'm so proud of that book because there's 25 different perspectives on how to come out the other side. And interestingly, and then I'll get back to what culinary therapy is to me. I asked all these authors and they come from past life regression, Reiki, they're massage, they come from astrology, food healing, food coaching. They really are a range of talents from all over the world. And I never said to them, I want you to bring your worst trauma and I want you to write about it and how you came out the other side and what your healing tool is. I never said anything like that. I just said, I want you to bring your wisdom and your tool and provide it in a story for this book called High Vibrational Wellness. And then I started to collect all the stories. There's 25 of us, and each one was like telling their story, and a lot of them were a little traumatic. All ranges, anything you can think of, they wrote about it. And I just thought, wow, that I guess the universe wanted to share this book with all these stories and how they all came out of it, how they healed, and how they were introduced to their modality. And now they're sharing it with people. And I think that's why this book resonated so much because we have to feed our body, mind, and spirit. And you can read it in 25 little short stories, and they all leave you with a tool on how to heal out of something that can, you know, experienced as horrific, and then come out the other side and see that healing is 100% possible. For me, culinary therapy is what I teach at the Center for Intuitive Food Therapy. So that's my organization where I let people realize that the wisdom is all inside. If you open up that refrigerator, if you're going to and I teach you actually soul shopping, before you walk into that farmer's market or that grocery store, to me, it's very therapeutic to take a minute and see, what does my body need right now? Not last week, not 2 days ago. Like, what is my body calling for? Is there a protein it needs? Is there something it needs to anchor more into the ground? Am I feeling too much in my head? Am I over analyzing sort of that air element? How do I kind of bring myself? Or how do I get motivated? How do I take some action? Foods can do that. And if you just sit quietly, the therapy in culinary is providing meals for yourself that your soul just told you you need right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yes. I mean, I think, wow. I'm like, so would you suggest, because things change, like, there are people who grocery shop for the next 2 weeks. Should we be shopping like the day of, or even 2 days, 2 days of groceries?
Uh, that actually is what I wrote about in the book. Absolutely, I suggest that. And I know a lot of people do the big, the Costco, the Sam Clubs, the big, buying for the week. And you're right, some people buy for 2 weeks. And, especially if you're in rural areas, you buy but far ahead because you can't get to the store so easily. I'm a huge proponent of buying fresh and buying often because you never know what happens from day to day. And so you
Mhm.
came home, you missed the promotion at work, or whatever the situation is, somebody cut you off on the road today, and your energetic frame can change. And so how do you recover that? So I always love to be as fresh and bioavailable foods that are just ready to go and as simple as possible. So I'm a proponent of daily or every couple days versus that long-term buying, because food shifts, especially if it's been sitting. So yeah, that would be me. I know it's a lot of work to buy that often, but I think the body deserves it.
Wow. And, so this all seems very individualized by each person. If you're
Yeah.
buying for the family, does that make a difference? Do we need to make different meals for each person, especially like the children? I know a lot of people do, but I do make my children eat the food that I make.
I don't I advocate that people are an energetic kind of thread when they're in a family situation. And so I always
Mm.
tune in, what is my family? What should we make for dinner tonight? In fact, in the first um deck, one of the spreads, which are kind of like how you lay out cards, is make a meal spread. Like, what should we have for dinner night? And each one of us in the family pulls a card. And like I said earlier, with like that story where all of us had lost a pet, you can actually put together something. It's almost like chop. Y'all get an ingredient. What are we going to make? But you can actually surprisingly find out that sometimes you will all be craving something very similar. Like, wow, I'm really craving Asian. I'm really craving, Mexican. And you will find that the energy is very much aligned for a balanced meal for everybody. You do not need to create it's not individual. This is everyone,
Mm.
and you are the mama, so you are the most intuitive of all. And
Yeah,
so it would stand to reason that you would intuitively know what everybody needs and to
right.
take action that way.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
We have actually many children who are starting to learn about how to become intuitive with their food. And you mentioned earlier about smoothies, one of my books.
Mhm.
Interestingly, the Girl Scouts hired us one time, a troop, and they wanted to learn how to be more intuitive. Not so much they didn't use the word intuitive. They wanted to learn how to make smoothies and do
Mhm.
something fun and constructive. We knew that if we laid out a few different recipes, they would have the ability to choose which one. Well, interestingly enough, we had a few different smoothies, and they were fruits and maybe a couple vegetables, but like and it was a troop that was a little bit older, and the one, I just say, the one girl who was dealing with some acne, she kind of gravitated to the smoothie that had apples in it. And for me, I thought, oh my God, that's so amazing, because I knew the food scientists and nutritionists, apples have quercetin, and quercetin's for the skin. And it could have been a coincidence, or it could have been, wow, her body was like really wanting her to have the one smoothie that would be best for her complexion. And so it's
Wow.
amazing. So we do work with kids all the time. We might not say, this is a chakra food, but we say, look, what colors are you attracted to, depending on the age? What food are you feeling? Foods for the moods. There's ways to get them to start realizing the importance of trusting, like, I really want to have strawberries tonight, or bananas, or whatever. So smoothie
Wow.
is a great way of teaching kids and
Very cool.
adults.
I will check that out, and I love how
Yeah.
you said, foods for your moods. That should be another book, maybe for kids.
Well, we had taught a class for a while, foods for the moods, and then
Oh.
and it's interesting because when you lay out foods, and you can actually start to teach kids geography. If there's, I made a point of bringing not just foods that you'd see here in America, but foods from all over the world, because I think it's important you see how people are healing in other countries, and
Mm.
how foods are starting to become mainstream here that you wouldn't have seen before. So we have foods like soursop and durian and moringa, and these are becoming more mainstream. In one of the books I wrote recently was called Top Exotic Foods for Natural Healing. And it's
Mm.
just a little handbook, but I chose 10 of those foods because I wanted people to see that food is medicine. And so you think about soursop, and most people are, I mean, it's interesting. People mirror, oh, that's for cancer, isn't it? Or bitter melon. Oh, wait a minute. That's for, like they would just immediately know what it's for, diabetes, that
Mm.
sort of thing. And so I started to lay foods out for people to understand, and then I would put together, not to be all nerdy about it in science, but I want people to realize that the National Institute of Health are doing multiple studies on food, that these foods that are in other places and here, grown in Florida, you can get soursop right here, are being studied for many, many different ailments: cholesterol, diabetes, depression, PTSD, everything. And so I just wrote a little handbook on my 10 favorite ones. And then I gave them little expert excerpts of the studies so you can see how important food is. But getting back to the kids, it also teaches them geography. Did you know this is grown in, in the jungles in, Peru or whatever? So, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
You mentioned chakra foods, like chakra nourishing
yeah,
foods. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I didn't realize that was a thing.
yeah, it is. So, do you know about the chakra system?
Hmm. We
We have,
do.
I would say we normally talk about the seven, there's more, but let's just say we have this seven energy centers of the body. They all correspond to a color, and they all have different, if you will, personality traits. So they all represent something different. So whether you're at your root, which is kind of grounding in and anchoring a foundation, or you have the heart chakra or the throat chakra, which is all
Hmm.
about communication, those correspond to colors, and they also correspond to words that feel and represent those areas. So I'll give you an example. The throat chakra. I had a student taking one of my certification courses, and it was so amazing that I find myself repeating it a lot. We broke for lunch, but just before for lunch, she says, I have been really remiss because I feel like I'm a little bit of a wallflower. I don't speak my truth. I don't say how I feel. I don't stand up for myself. I don't. It was all about how she wants to be more that way. And then we go break for lunch, and she says to me, and by the way, totally random, but I just thought I'd ask you, what is the radish card? I've been craving radishes for 2 weeks, she tells me. And I stopped and turned around and I said, well, the radish card is our communicate card. I mean, it was literally the one thing she was just saying, is that she was not effectively communicating. And I just see that a lot. So although a radish is red and it doesn't really represent the blue of the throat chakra, communication does. And bok choy is one of our cards. Bok choy is not blue, but it's actually in my logo to represent the throat chakra. And that is our truth card, speaking our truth, communicating our truth. And so I have worked with clients like, you might want to have a little bok choy, like really step into your truth, because
Ah.
foods have that energetic to do that. So yes, when you look through some of my teachings, I provide you the foods and the chakras that they correspond to.
Wow, wow. I when you were describing that story, I was like, "Oh, is that me?" My throat chakra always comes up when I worked with a Reiki practitioner. That was always
Interesting.
something because while I do have this podcast, the reason why this podcast is basically born out of my trauma, right? And so it's speaking because that was the only thing that kind of set me free, and because I kept the trauma hidden for a very, very, very long time. And so once I actually said it out loud, it was as if like a weight was lifted. And so now I felt this need to communicate it. And so that always comes up.
Well, I could have chosen any of the other chakras, but I just really felt, yeah, to talk about. I don't know. That's what the information showed me. Like, talk about throat chakra. So if that was to
Yep.
support you, then yes. I think that's a really important piece of healing. I mean, I worked with clients for years all over the world, and that throat chakra, to be able to express yourself, is so important. And even if you bring it back to the energy around um, food, sometimes I remember growing up, talk about trauma. I remember growing up and you needed to eat your food because the
Right.
people were starving in other countries and you're not going to waste it. And we worked too hard to, provide food on the table. It's like that food wasn't, now as a grown up, I'm not in resonance with that food. My body didn't want it. I didn't like it, but I'd be the last to leave the dinner table until that food was eaten. But I realized that my body was already talking to me saying, no.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
but we have an opportunity now to use our voice. Like, I'm not in resonance with that. And so when you open up your refrigerator, you can actually look and see what jumps out at you. That is you communicating with your soul, like, yes. And now you can actually look up, like, why do I really want those oranges? Why is that calling to me? Is it something with my orange sacral chakra? Is it something to do with um, needing more vitamin C? But you can start to have that dialogue and find out, is this emotional? Is this mental? Is this physical? Is this spiritual? And you will get the answers, because we want the balance of all four for
Mm.
optimal living, longevity.
Amazing. Wow, I really could talk to you for hours. But I know I won't because you have a very busy day. But I do want to ask if there is anything that you would like to add.
Yeah, I do retreats. I do what I'm sharing with you all over the world. I do what is called Nourish Your Soul Retreats. And a lot of times I take some of my co-authors, and other times it's me leading you in a week, a sojourn into wellness, where I'll take you somewhere to experience what it's like to eat intentionally, what it's like to have intuitive food therapy. And I'll bring in chefs and create foods for you. Or we walk through a medicinal herb garden on a mountain, and we have opportunities to have that healing take place. So I offer those to people who ever felt like they wanted to get away and truly nourish their souls and really experience what it's like to get readings, to get healings, to get an understanding of transformation from the inside out. And so I just wanted to offer that. And then I mentioned that I'm actually leaving today for Nepal.
Mhm.
My ministry, if you will, is I work with a centuries old formula family who's been creating these wonderful Ayurvedic teas from, for, I said centuries, but there's a whole line of them. And I'm blessed to bring them to the US now. They're called Nourish Your Soul teas. And the purpose of doing that is to empower these villages where the girls are not being empowered, and they've had a rough go of it. It's been a 200-year culture there of trafficking, and we're helping these families go and realize that they have these fertile, beautiful lands that can grow these plants, these herbs, and let's create economic impact that way for your families versus ways that aren't okay. And that's the problem all over the world. So, talk about trauma. We are actually utilizing these teas to help these families, and these teas are wellness teas. So everyone who drinks the teas now here in the US, they're already really big in Asia and Europe, but now we're blessed to bring them here. And so I'm going to go work with my colleagues over there with these teas, but it's a really amazing way. So some of these girls have now grown up, survivors, and now are working in the tea company and have new lives. And so so that's sort of a ministry of ours, is to help the trauma victims over there with this tea business, and it's working. So
Oh
now
my
the
gosh.
tea's here.
Incredible. And anyone could purchase these teas.
Yeah, they're
Mhm.
right on the website, ciftofficial.com, which is CIFT official, which that CIFT is Center for Intuitive Food Therapy. Yeah,
Great.
CIFTofficial.com.
Wow, I'll include that in the show notes. So, and also where to find all of your products and your book, High Vibrational Wellness, Intuitive Healing Therapies to Nourish Your Body. Um, Thank you so much. I really, really loved having you on and just learning so much. I love the podcast because I learned so much from people, but I really felt like I really learned so much of what I really had zero clue about.
Oh, wow. Well, that's my honor. Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Right.
That was Lainie Sevante Wulkan, #1 best-selling author of High Vibrational Wellness, Intuitive Healing Therapies to Nourish Your Body Temple. To purchase her book and all of her products that she's produced and how she's helping the world, please go to my show notes and you'll find the link for Lainie's website. October's issue of Authentic Insider is out. Check out Authentic Insider at traumasurvivorthriver.com. That's traumasurvivorthriver.com, as well as past episodes of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my email list to get Authentic Insider magazine in your inbox monthly. Join us next week when I speak with integrative spiritual consultant and author Catherine Duncan when we discuss living fully and feeling deeply. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. I'm Lorilee Binstock. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Take care.